All right, good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of Senate Finance to order. Mr. Thorley, will you please call the roll?
Senator Dennis, Senator Kekeffer, Senator Goycochea, Senator Hammond, Senator Ratty, Senator Severs-Gansert, Senator Cannizzaro, Senator Dondero Loop, Chair Brooks.
Here, please mark the other members present as they arrive, and we will get started. We've got 5 bills on the agenda this morning, and then we will work session and then have public comment. And I'm going to take these bills out of order so that I can kind of expedite the agencies going back to their jobs. And I think I'm going to start this morning with Senate Bill 456, which revises provisions relating to the state dental health officer. And let me put my glasses on, see who we have. And this was referred to the Committee on Finance, came from can't remember where it came from.
Mr. Chair, if you would like, I can.
Yes, sir.
Senate Bill 456 is a committee bill. It's a budget implementation bill related to a budget closing decision by the money committees, transferring the state dental health officer from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, and then making it an unclassified position. And it looks like we've got Administrator of the Healthcare Financing and Policy here to testify.
Morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Suzanne Bierman, and I'm the Administrator for the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. As Mr. Thorley mentioned, today we're here to present SB 456, and this bill implements the division's budget as closed by this committee by changing statutes necessary to transfer this position to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. As you may recall, transferring this position results in state general fund savings because with this position housed with the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, 75% federal matching funds are now available for this position. And I'm here and happy to answer any questions along with Julia Peak from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health and Cody Finney from Medicaid.
Thank you, Ms. Bierman. And I apologize, I get this confused with another dental bill. And do we have any questions on Senate Bill 456 from the committee? Well, that was easy. All right, well, that's it. Thank you, I appreciate it. And we will then, with no questions on this, since we all heard this decision in our closing subcommittee and then full committee closings, I will see if we have anybody here in support of Senate Bill 456. And do we have anybody on the phones in support of Senate Bill 456?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Senate Bill 456, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Do we have anyone on the phone in opposition to Senate Bill 456?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 456, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral to Senate Bill 456?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 456, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. And Chair, we have no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. So thank you, Ms. Bierman, and we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 456, and we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 457.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Julie Butler Director, Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm here to present Senate Bill 457. Sections 1 through 3 of the bill reenact and extend through June 30th, 2026, the maximum amount of highway funds the department can use for the cost of administration from 22% to 27%. Section 4 provides authorization for the department to have expended up to 27% of highway funds for the cost of administration retroactively to June 30th, 2020. Section 5 makes the bill effective upon passage and approval and applies retroactively from and after June 30th, 2020. The practical effect of this request allows the DMV to use a greater percentage of highway funds to replace the DMV's current technology platform and help fund the transformation project to move the majority of our services online in the next 4 years. During the pandemic, it became clear to us that this needed to be our number one goal, as was the same with many businesses, other businesses and state agencies. This bill is needed to continue our progress on this critical project for the department and for the state of Nevada. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Director Butler. Do we have any questions from the committee? We have Senator Keycaffer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Butler. Did you go over the cap either last fiscal year or are you expecting to this fiscal year? Over 22% in terms of administrative expenses from the highway fund? I'm sorry. Let me rephrase.
Julie Butler for the record. Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair Brooks, to Senator Kepper. We did not go over the cap fiscal year 2021. The reason for that is that we put our transformation project on pause in fiscal year 2021 as we sought to conduct a study of what really was needed for our program and sought to really develop a roadmap and a logical path forward for our transformation progress. So we really, we didn't do, other than the study, there was not a lot of expenditures in the last fiscal year. We're not anticipating that to be the case, though, going forward.
Yeah, certainly. And as you make your transformation in the upcoming biennium, that seems really logical. So what's the need to make it apply retroactively to the current fiscal year in 2020?
Julie Butler, record, through you, Chair Brooks, to Senator Keycapper. The need to make it apply retroactively is due to Senate Bill 542 recently being declared unconstitutional, and so that we have the authority to continue spending up to that amount.
Right, I appreciate that, but if you weren't going to go above 22% in fiscal year 20 or 21, then the retroactive provision seems unnecessary to me. I would understand the need to increase it to 27% in the upcoming biennium, but if for our current biennium, if we weren't going to cross over 22%, the retroactive piece seems unnecessary.
Julie Butler again for the record. Along with that, also came the department's collection of the $1 technology fee, and the department did collect that through fiscal years 20 and 21, and so making this apply retroactively would also ratify that fee.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's the case. I think there's a separate bill over in the Assembly that deals specifically with the fee. But if the indication is that this bill retroactively applies the fee, that's not how I read the bill.
Mr. Thorley?
Yep, Mr. Chair, thank you. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscals. Fiscal staff's understanding is that this bill only applies to the 27% moving the administrative cap from 22% to 27%, and that a separate bill, as Senator Keycaffer mentioned, has been introduced in the Assembly to address the $1 technology fee extension.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. And would this authority be necessary to facilitate the passage of that other bill, to the best of your understanding?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne Thorley for the record. When the money committees closed the DMV's budget, there was information provided to the members of the money committee regarding what the where the agency would be at as far as the administrative cap with and without the technology fee for the upcoming biennium. In both cases, both with the technology fee being collected and without the technology fee being collected, based on current and approved budgeted expenses for the upcoming biennium, that they would be under the cap. However, the DMV does have budget authority to transfer funding related to the modernization project between fiscal years, which again was, as Director Butler explained, precipitates the need for the increased cap. As far as the current fiscal year, and whether the 27% cap is needed as a result of the $1 technology fee not being allowable for the current fiscal year, I'll need to check with our DMV analyst to get information on that.
Julie Butler, against the record. I just got some additional information. The answer to your question, Senator Kiekefer, is that without extending the cap, we need more highway funds in fiscal year 21, and so that is the reason for making it retroactive in FY 21.
So, I'm sorry, for clarity's sake, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, for the current fiscal year, your budget would go over the 22% cap? I'm not sure what you mean you would need more highway funds.
I'm sorry, I'm consulting with my fiscal person here. If you give
So
me
am I.
just a second. Okay, great. Oh, okay, so clarification here, okay. So the bill that was declared unconstitutional had the technology fee going through June 30th of 2022 and the cap. So that bill was declared unconstitutional. So the reason for its needing to be retroactive is we need additional highway funds now because we can't collect the technology fee in fiscal year 22. So this bill would rectify that.
So additional highway funds for what?
For the DMV's program for transformation.
For the technology project, ultimately?
Yes.
And that was,
Yes.
what, $700,000? Or what was the, I'm sorry, no, what was the total number for that amount? And so that, I'm sorry, I know it was more than 700, it was like 7 million, right? So that 7 million from the highway fund would push you over the 22% cap?
We would be close, yes.
Mr. Chair, I believe for FY21, the projected revenue from the $1 technology fee is about 5.9 million.
Thank you. And then the change of the cap was in that same piece of legislation as the technology fee.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Correct.
And as I understand Senator Kiekefer's question, it specifically relates to FY21 only, and why the administrative cap increased is needed for FY21. Correct? Not going forward, but just retroactively for the current fiscal year.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. If my understanding was that even with, or that the DMV was not going to exceed the 22% cap, so applying that change retroactively would be unnecessary. Ms. Butler's indicating that maybe if they bring in more highway funds to replace that, then maybe they go above it. I'd like to get that dialed down to understand it fully, but going forward, certainly no problem in raising the cap to 27%.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. And so just kind of following up on what Senator Keycover said. So I think what would help me is some definition around how much money you actually do need to spend, and then maybe we can back in, and maybe we aren't going to exceed the cap in 21, fiscal year 21. But also, this legislation seems unusual to me, because typically what we do is we have legislation specifically for the projects and what the dollars are. And I know what it sounds like is, even if we define what the dollars are, we have to figure out whether they're above or below the 22% cap. So if we knew what the projects were, or the expenses during the fiscal years, so it would be fiscal year 21, which is left, 22 and 23, we can figure out exactly where you need to be as far as the cap. And so can you tell me if the dollars themselves are in another bill, or whether you have flexibility within the cap, or whether, so it's like, are the dollars in a bill and we've got to change the cap to make sure you don't exceed the cap, or can the dollars be spent outside the cap? Because I also know this cap is supposed to expire, I think it said in 26, and it's a little concerning, because we want to make sure that does expire, because sometimes we set ourselves up with a temporary bump and then it never reverts back. So how much do you need to spend? Where does that land as far as the cap for fiscal year 21, 22, and 23? Thank you.
Julie Butler for the record. In looking at our projections for fiscal year 21, I got some information from staff, and we are only at about 13% of the cap without the technology fee revenue. So I would agree that we don't need the 27% in fiscal year 2021. For fiscal years 22 and 23, we are looking at about 18.5% of the cap without the technology fee, and 20% in fiscal year 2023. We do need the flexibility to transfer those funds between fiscal years because of how the nature of large projects, particularly IT projects. The practical effect of doing that, moving money between fiscal years in a particular year, may put us over that historical 22% cap, which is the reason for requesting it at 27% going forward for fiscal year 22-23.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So it sounds like you're substantially below the cap for 21 and below the cap for 22 and 23. So my follow-up question would be, where do you think you're going to land? Because bumping from 22 to 27 is significant. And can you come to IFC to be able to, or do you even have to go to IFC to transfer those funds? And maybe we can narrow it down a little bit, because again, I think 27, especially when you just told us you're going to get maybe around 20. And so you still have some margin.
Julie Butler again for the record. We do have some margin. We would have to go to IFC to request to transfer those funds between fiscal years. Keep in mind, if there are some unanticipated expenditures that we might need going forward in fiscal year 2022, that might also account for additional highway funds. And so again, trying to be proactive and not expend more than we're legislatively authorized, going up to the 27% with IFC approval to transfer money between fiscal years would give the department the flexibility we need to sustain the project going forward for the next 4 years.
I just have one last question. If there's a federal package that comes down, this infrastructure package, will you also, does your 22% apply to all federal dollars that come through, whether the current expected stream, or whether it's a stream that is bumped up because of federal dollars?
Julie Butler for the record. Any federal funds that we would get as a result of the infrastructure package would be outside our cap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? So is it my understanding, Ms. Butler, that, Senator Gokachia, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just kind of a follow-up on that, even though they would be outside the cap, Ms. Butler, those monies, federal dollars would be available, correct?
Julie Butler again for the record. We're not certain what would be available to the DMV. We have looked at the just at a very high level at the governor's plan for those funds. We're trying to ascertain where the DMV might fit in terms of those funds, but we've not really undertaken an in-depth analysis of that and undergone any sort of application process yet for those funds.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So just wanted to clarify, so they're based upon your updated numbers, removing any retroactive, the retroactive language on the cap wouldn't limit the DMV's ability to do anything that they're currently doing as long as you have the flexibility moving forward, the cap moving forward, as well as the flexibility to move between fiscal years. Is that correct?
Julie Butler for the record. Yes, that's correct. We, looking at our projections, again, in fiscal year 21, we're fine with the highway cap. It's really 22 and 23 that we're concerned about. Additionally, if the revenues don't come in as projected for fiscal year 22, 23, we would need a higher percentage of highway fund to sustain the project. So again, that's where that 27% cap comes in.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions for Director Butler from the committee? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. You know, one comment on this legislation. Right now, this legislation's tying it back to the tech fee, and which was found unconstitutional. So I think if we're updating this bill, we need to make sure it's not tying it to that tech fee, and that it's moving forward. It's in the future versus retroactive. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Butler. We'll go and see if we have anyone in support of Senate Bill 457 on the phones.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Senate Bill 457, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 457?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 457, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral position on Senate Bill 457?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 457, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. So with that, we can close the hearing on Senate Bill 457. And we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 353. And Senate Bill 353 requires the Department of Education to review certain assessments. And this was from the Committee on Education. And Senator Dennis, did you want to introduce it? And I know we have Superintendent Eber here as well. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dennis, Senate District 2, representing Senate District 2. So Senate Bill 353 is one that came out from the interim. The Committee on Education had some bills that they did, and this was one of the ones. This was an issue that we've talked about before. We've actually done a study before to look at the exams and assessments that we do, but it was more a higher level, where this particular bill gets more in-depth, looking to see what is being done in the classroom at the district level, to see what kinds of exams. The concern that we heard was that we're testing too much, and so we want to know how we want to have a study done that looks at how do we figure out ways to reduce testing so that there's more classroom instruction and less testing. So that's really what the basics of it, and it requires an appropriation to be able to do that.
Thank you, Senator. And before I go to Superintendent Ebert, Mr. Thorley, it's just it's the one. Looks pretty straightforward. One fiscal note as an appropriation to the Nevada Department of Education to do this study. Any other fiscal impacts to be aware of?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. There's just the one fiscal note from the Department of Education with a $250,000 over the biennium for a contract to evaluate the existing examinations and assessments, and then also a $2,864,000 in FY22 related to costs associated with promulgating regulations.
And I note effect on future biennia and of $250,000 as well. Is this an ongoing contract or a 2-year or a 4-year commitment?
Mr. Chair, Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. Based on the language in the bill, it appears that this would be an ongoing cost. The requirement on the Department of Education to review examinations and assessments appears to be an ongoing requirement.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Dennis from the committee? Seeing none. Superintendent, would it be possible to ask you a few questions? Good morning. Is it your understanding, based on the requirements in Senate Bill 353, that there would be the need moving forward with $250,000 every biennium to maintain the requirements in the bill?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you for having me here this morning. If the legislature would like us to continue the work of the assessment going across the entire state, how school districts are administering the data that's being received from the school district and how it's improving student achievement, then yes, that would be an ongoing recurring cost.
Thank you. And yeah, I must just be misunderstanding the bill, because I didn't necessarily see it as just something that was ongoing, more than just a one-time study. But Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Superintendent, what would happen if we didn't have this ongoing, like we only did it during one biennium or one time, or would you take us down that road?
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for the record. What this bill is requesting is that we actually go deeper than what had transpired during the last legislative session. So not only looking at the federal assessments, the state assessments, but really digging deeper into what is required, what school district superintendents and or school boards may require their students, the examinations that they may be required to take. So it's not only, doing an assessment, if you will, an inventory, creating a baseline of what currently exists. So if we were just to do a study over the 2 years, we'd be able to collect all of that data. The bill does ask the department and the State Board of Education to adopt regulations. So we would be creating a baseline. If we wanted to continue to dig in deeper, which some of the states do across the nation, have those annual or biannual reviews, then we would be willing to participate in those.
Thank you. Can I follow up, Chair? So with that being said, if you mentioned other states, so can you give us an example of a couple states that may do this? And then I think the other thing that's important that you said that I think a lot of times people don't realize is some of these assessments are federally mandated for certain reasons. And so I'm not asking for an hour, but if you can just give us a couple sentences on that.
Great. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you, Senator Dondero-Luke, for the question. So some of the states, just off the top of my head, Massachusetts, I know New Hampshire does quite a bit of work, especially in looking at alternative assessments, and then, more than happy to provide you other research. That being said, this is an opportunity for us to truly understand what has transpired over time. And we are seeing a shift as well currently with the new Secretary of Education wanting to also review the assessments that are required. I think the biggest part of this that we'll need to make sure is crystal clear when we're finished is the communication component. Because even as superintendent now, I know there are times when our community does not understand what is federally mandated, what is state mandated, and then what is locally mandated at each district level. And so that layering that happens and being crystal clear of, the requirements for us to receive federal funds is to make sure that we are assessing our students. And so I think we could all be doing a better job in clarity of the why we assess and making sure that once the information is provided, that we take action on those assessments and, to drive instruction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ratty, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just actually reading the fiscal note. And so I think I have a little bit better understanding now. So the bill actually sets limits on the amount of time that can be dedicated to assessments for a school district. And then in the regulatory process, is it your intent to have an ongoing process to be in touch with school districts to make sure that the limitations that are in this bill are being followed? Is that part of what the regulatory process will create?
Superintendent Ebert, yes.
And then would it be this position's job to kind of check in and see if that's happening?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, yes.
Okay, so I guess then my question is, if it's an ongoing effort, the language here says estimates for future biennial impacts were not included in the estimate because the proposed legislation does not indicate the frequency at which to review examinations or assessments. So I think the bill is actually kind of vague, to Chair Book's point, but if the intent is to do it in an ongoing basis, why a contractor and not an employee that is just on point on assessments all the time? Is it an external expertise that we don't have?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, currently in the department, that is expertise that we do not have. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Keycapper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This weighs a little bit into the policy, and I apologize, but if a student's taking 4 AP exams, would those AP exams potentially count against the cap on the amount of time that can be dedicated to testing?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, the AP exams are not required. They're individual choice by student and family, so I would not recommend that be included
It's all mandatory.
in a definition.
Required examinations.
Correct.
And college entrance exams have an educational benefit, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm listening to the discussion and trying to figure out exactly how this rolls out, because I thought that when you hire an outside source, you are trying to figure out, you're laying out for the districts, here are the state exam, or here are the federal exams that you must take. Here are the state exams that you must take by legislation, which doesn't change often. I mean, it doesn't change that often. And then the evaluation is really on how much of the district tests that they would like to administer to students impact the ability to take the federal and the state tests. I'm trying to think of this through my mind here. So you're basically trying to tell the district, trying to show the districts that you are taking too much time. That this is how much time you have to do the state tests. You have to do these federal tests. You have to take these state tests. And then we're evaluating what tests you're requiring at the district level. And then perhaps maybe there's a teacher or two who administers some tests at the classroom level because they'd like to. And so you're kind of giving them a guide, if you will, to how do you eliminate some of the tests that are, you're already getting this information from state testing, you're already getting this information from federal testing. So that's the way I see it happening. I'm trying to figure out why you would need to do this every 2 years, though. Once you produce a guide, would not that last for a certain number of years until there's changes in state testing and federal testing?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you for the question, Senator Hammond. So you're absolutely right in everything that you were noting. What we see, and as you also noted, is that the federal assessment system, I believe, I don't have a crystal ball, but as we can see, there will most likely be a shift over time. That's what they've been signaling. And it is something that we should not only in the federal level, but also as a state, continue to monitor what those, number one, why we're doing those assessments. Number two, how they're being used to take action in the classroom. I don't think that we've done a good job as a state to make sure that we explain the why. A lot of people don't understand that assessments truly are an equity driven piece, so that we have an understanding and the gap. So what I would add to what you were stating is also critically important, the teacher piece, right? We need to make sure that our educators with their daily formative components of their of educating our students, but the piece in between the district and the teacher, the school principal, because as we've seen and as there's been testimony, that also becomes a piece in the system. And it's so working the entire system, making sure that we are not duplicative in the assessments and that teachers have the time to teach is what we're looking at.
Thank you. And I think that to Senator Ratty's point, at some point, maybe you bring in the expertise into maybe the NDE and work through that method instead of hiring out every 2 years. It just seems like an expense, but it just seems like that you would want to have somebody around that knows what's going on at the federal level, and then currently updating or continually updating everybody in the districts what's going on.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we will see if we have anybody here in support of Senate Bill 458.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, in support of the bill. We spoke on the bill in the policy committee as a top concern of classroom educators has been too many standardized tests, shifting the focus away from, in the classroom, away from student learning towards a culture of high stakes testing. We've been active on this issue here at the legislature since the 2017 session. We'd note that this bill would require the Department of Education to look at the benefits, costs, and any inefficiencies in student assessments and adopt regulations to prescribe limits on the time and number of student assessments. And while there's a fiscal bill, I believe it's $250,000 that the State Department of Education submitted, we believe that over time, the savings of this bill in terms of fewer payments to testing companies would achieve a cost savings for the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of Senate Bill 353? All right, can we go to the telephones and see if we have any support of Senate Bill 353?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Senate Bill 353, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 353?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 353, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral on Senate Bill 353?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 353, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. We can close our hearing on Senate Bill 353, and I would like to open our hearing on Senate Bill 458. And Senate Bill 458 is a committee bill ensures sufficient funding for K through 12 public education for the 21-23 biennium. And Mr. Thorley or Mr. Hartz, if you wanted to tee that up.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 458 is the assigned bill number to the K-12 education funding BDR that fiscal staff walked the joint money committees through yesterday evening. The language in Senate Bill 458 is exactly the same as the language that was presented to the joint money committees in the BDR form. Staff is available to answer questions, any questions the committee members may have regarding Senate Bill 458. However, given that we just walked through this bill in detail yesterday, we were not planning on giving another presentation on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. And yeah, it was just 12 hours ago we were sitting upstairs listening to a detailed explanation of this bill. Do we have any questions from the committee on Senate Bill 458? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thanks, Chair Brooks. So I still haven't figured out the charter piece, how individual charter schools are not held harmless, and some of them have as much as 15% cuts year over year. And I don't have the source documents to try to figure that out, but I know even with the small area adjustment, which was helpful, there's more than a few charter schools that are short, and I'm not sure how we remedied that.
So Senator Severs-Gansert, I'll take a shot at answering this question, and we've got our education team also available via Zoom to respond. So a couple things to note as it relates to charter schools and when comparing the adjusted base per pupil amount for charter schools to the adjusted base per pupil amount to school districts where the charter school may be located. The money committees approved extending a portion of the equity adjustment to charter schools. There's two parts of the equity adjustment. There's an attendance area adjustment, so for remote location adjustment, and then there's also a size adjustment. So small schools that have fewer students that need more resources, the fixed costs are still there even with the smaller number of students, receive an adjustment. The charters are only getting as approved by the money committees, the charter schools are only getting the attendance area adjustment and not the small size adjustment. And the reasoning behind that was that charter schools have the ability to control their size. So that size adjustment was not extended to the charter schools in the language of the bill. Whereas school districts do get the size adjustment when it comes to the equity adjustments for the adjusted base per pupil funding. So a charter school in a particular county isn't necessarily going to have the same adjusted base per pupil as the school districts in the county, because the equity adjustment's a little different. It's also important to note that the adjusted base per pupil numbers for a school district include all the schools in that district. So a good example, which I think came up yesterday, would be White Pine County. The adjusted base per pupil number for White Pine County includes all the schools in White Pine County, so not just those that are in Ely that may not get the as much or any adjustment for the remote location, but also includes schools in Lund and McGill, which are way away from the population center in Ely and therefore have a higher adjusted base per pupil amount. So all that gets rolled into the White Pine County adjusted base per pupil number, which could cause the individual county's adjusted base per pupil number to be higher than a charter school's adjusted base per pupil number that's in that same county, because when it comes to the charter school, that number is specific just to that charter school and not to all the schools in the county. I want to make sure that was clear about how those equity adjustments were included in the model.
So thank you. I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense, because when I look at these, the smallest schools are the ones that are hit the hardest, and they're probably the ones who can least afford it, because they don't have room to be able to balance their budget. So I'm not sure why that, you said attendance area and the size adjustment, and that size adjustment, that sounds like they're being treated differently than your mainstream public schools, if the mainstream public schools are getting both of those pieces. And so that's concerning, because again, the smaller they are, the more they're hurt. Has there been a calculation of what it would take to make sure that they get the attendance and also the size adjustment?
Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. I do not believe that calculation has been performed.
That would be a good number to have, because the schools that are maybe 50 kids to 250 kids are getting hit extremely hard, and the ones that are 9,000 kids are plussed up almost 3%. And so there's, when you're in a large school district and you have a small school, you can move your dollars around. But when you're a charter, an independent charter, that's sponsored by either a local school district or the state, they don't have room to move funds around. So I think that's a really important number for us to have now that we have a level down of understanding that there's two factors and the charters were left out of one that all other public schools have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Severs-Gansert. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Senator Gocochea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm struggling with it, and I'm going to move away from White Pine, although I raised that yesterday. But in my mind, there is also an inequity, even in the Elko County School District, where we've got the charter in Elko, and they're receiving significantly less dollars, and they're in the same setting. And so, I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Thorley. You're saying how we calculated it, and the fact that they don't get that piece for being a small school in that area, but it really doesn't allow for parity. It's a problem, and it's going to be a problem to those charter schools, and they're clearly educating a piece of those students.
Thank you, Senator Gocochea. Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee on Senate Bill 458? Sorry. Senator Dennis.
Can I just follow up a little bit on the charter? So if we were actually looking at how much they currently get versus what they would get under the people-centered funding plan, did we not make some adjustments that actually increased what they were getting over the last time? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. It could just be that because over all of them, it may make that change, but where are they ending up today versus where they were, yesterday, or next fiscal year versus now?
Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. So it varies by charter school. Obviously, there's several charter schools in this state, and can't make a blanket statement for all the charter schools. The decision was made by the money committees when evaluating whether charter schools would be on the pupil-centered funding plan or on hold harmless. The decision was made to evaluate all the charter schools as a group rather than on an individual basis. And again, that was only done for purposes of evaluating hold harmless. When that evaluation was done, all the charter schools as a group fell on the pupil-centered funding plan and not the hold harmless provisions. So because the charter schools are all on the pupil-centered funding plan, there's going to be variations in the level of funding among the charter schools.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Thanks, Chair Brooks. Some information I have is that there's probably about a third of the charter schools that aren't where they were the prior year. So since they're not held harmless, they aren't where they were, and it's really the smaller ones that are having the issue. And then, I'd asked about the information as far as the dollars to at least hold them harmless, if not an increase, but just even harmless. And how long would that take? Because I know we're under a time crunch. How long would it take to be able to get that information?
So Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. It's difficult for staff to estimate how long that will take. So this is and sorry for the non-committal answer. This is a brand new model, the People-Centered Funding Plan.
You're on.
Did you want to, Mr. Drost, did you want to jump in?
I'm sorry, Mr. Thorley. We did run, this is Adam Drost with LCB Fiscal. We did run some calculations comparing the FY 2022 amounts that would be provided to each charter school. And there are 56 charter schools. And of those, 9 would receive less funding than they received in FY 2020 on those awarded or revenue received amounts. Of those, I would note that 2 are kind of anomalies because they reflect some decreases in enrollment. But for the remaining 7, would receive less funding than they received in FY 2020.
Can we ask how much funding that would be? In total, even a cumulative amount?
Sure, Senator Sievers-Gansert, in response, for those 7 charters that didn't have the anomalies related to attendance, it appears the reduction totals to about $1.4 million in FY 2022.
Thank you, and thank you for your allowing me to continue, Chair Brooks. So to hold them harmless as individual schools, I guess it sounds like it's another $1.4 million, which is not that much to the state, but a lot to those individual schools. And I guess why that's concerning is because that becomes their base moving forward. And the way that this gets calculated up, that this year is the most critical year for how we set all these numbers. And I think that's why we went back and we revised the model to make sure that we added to the base substantially before we went to the weights, because we knew that was to try to get as many school districts out of hold harmless as possible. We went to the base to increase it, and now when we look at charter schools to be able to treat them equally, it sounds like we need to maybe add a little bit more money to make sure that their starting numbers are equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments from the committee on Senate Bill 458? All right, thank you. I don't see any, so I'd like to go to support for Senate Bill 458.
Hello and good morning, Committee Chair Brooks and committee members. For the record, my name is Hava Ahmed, Hawahahmad, and I'm here representing the Clark County Education Association. CCEA represents over 18,000 licensed educators and is the largest independent teachers association in the country. We engage in bipartisan advocacy to advance public education in Nevada. CCEA would like to thank this committee for your hard work on the People-Centered Funding Plan, and we are in full support of SB 458. Throughout the history of education in Nevada, we have consistently put our students and educators last. However, this legislative session, and under this bipartisan leadership by both houses and the governor, we have done what we thought was impossible, and we put more money in education than we ever have. There is truly no way for us to be able to truly thank everyone on this committee and in this legislature for the hard work that has been accomplished over the last week, but we will try. And the one thing that we can note is that you heeded our call when we asked for help for funding. As we proceed with the implementation of the PCFP, we ask that we all continue to work together, and we stand ready to continue the work with this legislature, the governor, gaming, and mining to ensure that we continue to put our students first in Nevada. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in support of Senate Bill 458? All right, can we go to the phones and see if we have any support for 458 on the phones, please?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Senate Bill 458, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Can we see if we have anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 458? Here in the room?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Victor Salcido, and I'm here on behalf of the Charter School Association of Nevada. We have some of the same concerns that were addressed here today after seeing the numbers as they were released yesterday, namely that we have, as we just heard, at least 9 schools that will be in a hold harmless position, yet because we are lumped together collectively for the triggering of that provision, are not actually being held harmless. And so that is a grave concern because, as was expressed earlier today, some of those schools are some of our smaller schools with even less margin for error and for being able to make ends meet. So for some of them, it really would be an existential crisis for them. And we heard, over and over again over the last 2 years that during this transition, that no child or no school would be harmed. And we're concerned that there are a number of schools that have fallen through the cracks. And so we would ask that hold harmless be applied on the individual school level, because that's how charter schools are funded. We're not funded collectively. It wouldn't make any more sense than to saying school districts would be held harmless, but they're going to be collectively lumped together as a state to see if their number went up or down. It's how they're funded, and charter schools are funded individually. So lumping them together negates the purpose of hold harmless for many of them. So because of that, we have strong concerns and are in opposition as it's currently written. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in the room in opposition to Senate Bill 458? All right, can we go to the phones and see if we have anyone on the phones in opposition to Senate Bill 458?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 458, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 430, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Senator Brooks and members of the committee. My name is Dusty Casey, co-founder, Chief Financial Officer of Oasis Academy Charter School in Fallon, Nevada. I am also an appointed member to the Commission on School Funding and a parent of 2 charter school students. I'm speaking today as an administrator of a school and not in representation of the commission. I'm speaking today in opposition because of the hold harmless issue for charter schools. Hold harmless is in place to ensure that no child receives less educational resources and thus less educational opportunities than they were afforded in fiscal year 20. Grouping charters together for hold harmless and evaluating on total funding is no different than grouping districts and performing the same analysis. Increased resources in total does not eliminate harm to individual schools and students. Charter schools operate as their own individual districts with all the same burdens of running a district. And a charter school located in Elko County is no more similar to a charter school in Las Vegas than Elko County School District is the Clark County School District. They're completely different animals. Fundamentally, the PCFM creates equity for every student by ensuring resources follow the student. Hold harmless should be administered in the same manner. I would ask that you please implement hold harmless not only at the pupil level for calculation purposes, but at the school level as well for public charter schools to protect educational opportunities for every student in Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller in opposition, please.
Excuse me, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 458, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in opposition at this time.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral to Senate Bill 458? Seeing none here in the room, can we check on the phones?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 458, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. So with that, we can close the hearing on Senate Bill 458. And we can open up the hearing on Senate Bill 451, which establishes for the 2021-2023 biennium the subsidies to be paid to the Public Employees Benefit Program for insurance for certain active and retired public officers and employees. Mr. Hartz, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, good morning. For the record, Alex Hartz. Senate Bill 451 is colloquially known as the PEB rates bill. This is the outcome of the budget hearings and the establishing the budget for the 21-23 biennium. This is obviously a budget implementation bill. If you turn to page 2 of the bill, Section 1 establishes the composite state employer or the employer monthly contribution, $727 per month in fiscal year 22 and $755 in fiscal year 23. This is the amount that the employer, since there's also a handful of non-state active participants, their employers would potentially contribute as well. Section 2 of the bill establishes the contributions for retirees. The first section, subsection 1, provides the contribution for non-Medicare retirees, which is $471.50 a month in fiscal year 22 and $498 per month in fiscal year 23. Subsection 2 begins the section dealing with the state contribution for Medicare eligible retirees participating in PEB. As you can see in subsection 2, for those persons who retired before January 1, 1994, the base state contribution is $195 per month, which is $13 per month which is what the committee's approved, at the 15 years base service. For retirees who retired after January 1, 1994, it is again the $13 per month, up to a maximum of $260 per month, which is 20 years of service. And this bill becomes effective on July 1 for purposes of funding the employer contributions. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions from the committee on Senate Bill 451? I do not see any, so thank you very much, sir. And we will go to support for Senate Bill 451 here in the room. Good morning.
Good morning, Kent Irvin, for the record, Nevada Faculty Alliance. I am in support in part, opposed in part, and I have some neutral information, but I'm not neutral, so.
Then you might be in the wrong spot, sir.
Do you want me to come back in
Are
opposition?
you in support of Senate Bill 451?
It needs to be funded.
Are you in support of Senate Bill 451?
I'll get back up in opposition.
Okay. Do we have anybody in support of 451? Could we check and see if we have anyone's support on the phone lines, please?
Certainly. To testify in support on Senate Bill 451, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 832, please press star 6 to unmute. Thank you, caller. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Brooks and your committee for allowing me to speak this morning. My name for the record is Terry Laird, spelled Terrillard. I'm the Executive Director for the Retired Public Employees of Nevada, RPEN. Formed in 1976, RPEN has a long record of supporting and protecting the healthcare benefits earned by all public employees during their working careers. Our membership currently stands at nearly 8,000 dues-paying members. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We fully support SB 451 that follows along with the PEP budget that was approved earlier this month. Our members depend on their health reimbursement arrangements of $13 per month per years of service. It maxes out at 20 years, equating to roughly $260 per month, which again, our members need as they are on a fixed income. So we are happy that this contribution was raised from the original governor's recommendation and urge your support of this bill to keep that level of contribution for the retirees and also for the active still working who also depend heavily on this support. We would also like to see at some point when the American Rescue Funds are being distributed that some of that federal aid will be used to restore the life insurance benefits for actives and retirees that were cut, as it seems like a yo-yo, cut 1 year, restore the next year, only to be cut again. It would also be great to see that restored once and for all and left alone. Long-term disability is another benefit we'd like to see restored at some point for the actives in the near future as well. But again, this morning we're asking for your support of Senate Bill 451. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in support of 451 on the phones?
Thank you, Chair. We are currently in support testimony on Senate Bill 451. If you would like to testify in support, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And do we have anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 451 here in the room? Thank you.
Kent Irvin, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Clearly the PEB needs to be funded, so we are in support of funding PEB. And ditto to what Ms. Laird said about particularly the $13 per month for the retirees. We really appreciate that was added back. I primarily represent actives. The history I want to give you is that in FY 2020, so we're looking at section 1 of the bill, the state contribution was $761 per month. For FY 21, that went up 3%, 2.9% to $783. In January to March of 2020, before COVID, that was already not enough to fully fund the program because trend was going up more than 3%. It was somewhere in the 5 to 6% range. So we were already looking at premium increases because at that point in the biennium, there's no way to get another appropriation. Then COVID hit, and the program was asked to save $25 million. They did that by a combination of things, raising premiums by 42% for the high deductible plan and 24% for the HMO. They reduced the mandatory reserves by various changes of assumptions by $12 million for the HRA reserves and $7 million for the catastrophic reserves, and then they had pharmacy savings of $6.5 million. So that got them to the $25 million, which was taken out in AB3 of the special session as an employer holiday that is, I think, happening in June. So that effectively reduced the 783 that was appropriated. 11/12 of that is 718. So that's effectively what we're operating on for this fiscal year. In the bill for FY22, we have 727. So that's a bare increase after those cuts, trend, and so forth. But of course, what happened was we had raised rates, we'd taken some money out, but there was also claim suppression instead of excess expenses that were expected from COVID. So it actually turned out better than expected. And so at that rate, some excess reserves have been building up. But going forward, assuming that things return to normal now, by the time we get to FY23, the 755 will be below where we were without any medical inflation in 21 or 20. And to get back to where we were with a sort of average medical trend of 4% per year, instead of that 755, you would need somewhere around 847. More or less because they've had some savings and they changed the plan design a little bit. So that's for all 27,000 state employees, that would be an additional 30 million. Of course, this bill would be one place to do that. I realize this after the other budgets are in, and that's hard to do. Could be done somehow with federal money. But I would note that, as Mr. Hartz pointed out, some of these employees are on non-state funds, so you would like to get those non-state funds into the program by charging on an individual basis. But if we can't do that because it's too late in the process, somewhere $25 to $30 million, which was taken out in the special session, putting it back somehow would at least let us restore some of these benefits. And the important ones are the long-term disability, which for just one fiscal year before restoring in 23 would be $4.6 million, restoring the life insurance benefits to pre-pandemic levels of $3.5 million, and then to completely restore the benefits to pre-pandemic levels for 23, as I said, would probably cost around 25 to 30 million from state or federal funds. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the room in opposition to Senate Bill 451? All right, let's go to the telephone and see if we have anyone on the line in opposition of 451.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 451, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 853, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, UNLV Chapter President and Southern Nevada Government Affairs for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you to all of those who worked to restore the retiree benefit from previous cuts, and also to Chair Carlton for the premium holiday that was added back into PEB. But I am testifying in opposition to this funding bill because the whole process of the budget cuts and the way they came down really did not conform to NRS Chapter 287, the way they happened, where the board was supposed to make the decisions as to what to cut and how to cut and where to cut. This whole budget was a steamroller that started in November and worked its way throughout the year, leading to what you're looking at now, which is a severe cut compared to the needs of Nevada State employees and faculty. You must realize that these PEB plans that we have now are non-competitive. They are substandard compared to other states in the Western region. And we are now, state employees, basically the only ones within this Nevada budget who are suffering severe cuts due to COVID-19 that have not yet been restored. I implore you to work toward restoring PEB benefits at least to 2019 levels. This would cost $25 to $30 million to do so from the American Rescue Plan funds. What you're passing today is not going to sit well with Nevada State employees or their families, and will really be something bitter that we will look at unless there is some effort made to restore PEB benefits to previous levels through American Rescue Plan funds. I must register my opposition to this whole process and to the way this bill was produced and to the way it's put before you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are currently on opposition testimony on Senate Bill 451. If you have joined the call and would like to testify in opposition, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral on Senate Bill 451? We have someone here in the
Thank you,
room,
Chair.
and we'll go to the room first. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Brooks, and members of the committee. Priscilla Maloney with the AFSCME retirees. It's very nice to be here in neutral. And I say that with so much compassion and love for my home state. This country has been through an extraordinary experience, and every state government is wrestling with very difficult decisions, and the AFSCME retirees understand that. We are very grateful for our small part of PEB, and I say small because the number was tossed around. We've got 27,000 active employees who are members of PEB. We have a total of 72,000 members of PEB in the program when you bring in the dependents that are part of the members' families or households and the retirees. So the total group is around 72,000. So for us, which is basically about 12,000, that's state and non-state Medicare retirees, we're very grateful for how hard both money committees worked on coming for a resolution, at least for that one component of the plan. One thing I want to make clear for the record, because again, lots of numbers and factoids get tossed around in these hearings without cites sometimes. So specifically in AB3 in the special session, in the emergency environment that we were in, the employer, state of Nevada, received a premium holiday, and then going forward, this budget was balanced with a premium holiday now for the workforce. In the other parts of the plan, not the Medicare exchange. It doesn't affect us, that particular premium holiday, but that was a fix that was very creative and shows the extraordinary efforts to try and fix this program, which has a lot of moving parts. In any event, we are neutral, but we not neutral in that we recognize how hard this committee has worked to put this plan together and be able to balance our budget this extraordinary session. And we would hope that specifically the American Rescue Plan funds may be able to address, by our understanding of the restrictions on those funds, specifically the employer premium holiday out of the special session. That might be, I say might because that's why you have that wonderful LCB to advise you on this, but that might be a piece or a component of putting money back into the program completely separate from the issue of the excess reserves, which I have every faith will be eventually handled. Anyway, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in the room in neutral? All right. Do we have anyone on the phones in neutral?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 451, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. So with that, we can close the hearing on Senate Bill 451. And that is the last bill that we were going to hear this morning. And now we're going to take just a very brief 5-minute recess while we get together with fiscal staff and talk about our work session items. Okay, we're ready to come back in whenever, looks like we're only missing one. All right, great. Our recess is over and we're back. And we're going to work session Senate Bills 353, 451, 456, 457, and 458. And we'll take them in that order. And if Mr. Thorley, if you could walk us through, starting with Senate Bill 353.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Senate Bill 353 was heard earlier this morning. The bill was presented by Senator Dennis. The bill is the result of a recommendation from the Interim Legislative Committee on Education. The bill would provide for a study of all exams, assessments, and testings performed in K-12 education. Superintendent Ebert provided testimony on the bill also and said the cost included in the department's fiscal note is related to evaluating the assessments and would be ongoing if the legislature wanted the department to continue the work of evaluating the assessments in future biennia. Regarding the fiscal impact, according to the Department of Education's fiscal note, the impact would be $250,000 over the 21-23 biennium for a vendor to perform the evaluation, and then approximately $3,000 in FY22 for costs related to promulgating regulations. Testimony and support was provided by Chris Daly with NSCA. There was no testimony in opposition or testimony in neutral. Mr. Chair, if the committee wishes to move forward with this bill and wishes to indicate that the funding for the assessment, for the evaluation of the assessments be one-time in nature and not included in the agency's base budget going forward, the committee should include that in any motion to amend the bill and add the funding. Happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. So do we have any questions on Senate Bill 353 from the committee? So I would be interested in a motion to amend, with the amendment being a one-time appropriation of $250,000 to NDE, with the understanding that it's not in their base budget, and then we come back and see the success of implementing the program and whether or not we should build it into the base budget. So I guess that's a long motion. It would be amend with the $250,000 one-time appropriation.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. Would that also include $3,000, or it's $2,864 for regulations?
Yes, yeah, everything that's in their fiscal note for the 21-22 biennium. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on that motion? Senator Dennis?
Thank you. And I think that discussion was helpful that we had. I think to really, for it to be effective, not just doing a study, but that they come back next time, I think, looking at this, that we have a way of an ongoing evaluation of what we're doing all the way to the classroom level to make sure that we're eliminating anything that's taken away from classroom instruction. So I think this is a good first step, and then come back and be able to put something more permanent in place going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously, and we'll sign that floor statement to Senator Dennis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Alex Hartz for the record. The next bill to work session is Senate Bill 451. Senate Bill 451 establishes for the 21-23 biennium the subsidies to be paid to the Public Employees Benefits Program for insurance for certain active and retired public officers and employees. This bill was heard this morning. It is a budget implementation bill. There was one individual who testified in support. There were two individuals who testified in opposition, and one individual testified in neutral. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hartz on Senate Bill 451? All right, I see none. All in favor? Oh, excuse me. I would take a motion to do pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Ratty. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously, and we'll assign that floor statement to Senator Sievers-Gansert. Thank you. And that brings us to Senate Bill 456.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 456 revises provisions relating to the state dental health officer. This bill was heard this morning. It was presented by Ms. Suzanne Bierman, Administrator of the Division of Healthcare Finance and Policy. As was heard in testimony, this is a budget implementation bill due to the approval by the money committees of the transfer of this function from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to the Division of Healthcare Finance and Policy. There was no testimony offered in support. There was no testimony in opposition, nor testimony provided in neutral. There are no amendments on this bill. If the committee wishes to pass it, it would be do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions on Senate Bill 456? All right, I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass, second from Senator Ratty. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously. And if I could assign that floor statement to Senator Ratty, please. And that brings us to Senate Bill 457.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 457 was presented by Director Butler with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Director Butler explained the bill increases the administrative cap from 22% to 27%, both retroactively to FY 2021, so the current fiscal year, but also going forward through FY 2026. There was discussion about whether the increase in the administrative cap is needed for FY 2021. Director Butler agreed that the cap increase does not need to be applied retroactively to the current fiscal year. Accordingly, Mr. Chair, the committee may wish to consider an amendment to amend that provision so that the increase in the administrative cap only applies to fiscal years 2022 through 2026. There was no testimony in support, opposition, or neutral on the bill, and happy to answer any questions the committee might have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on Senate Bill 457? Senator Severs-Gansert?
Mr. Chair, thank you. So I appreciate that it needs to be prospective, but I also think we need to clean up the language in the Legislative Council's digest because it talks about ratification of prior actions for the DMV that were found unconstitutional. So I think it needs to be a very simple bill if we're going to allow them to extend their cap and not have the preamble that it has in the digest.
Thank you. I think that makes sense. And if we remove the retroactive piece of this, it doesn't appear as if that preamble needs to even exist within this bill.
I would agree. Thank you.
Okay. And so, all right. So I guess any other discussion on this bill? All right. So motion would be to amend do pass, and with the amendment taking out all references of anything retroactive, including in the digest. And so I have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Kekeffer. Any discussion on that motion? All right. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously. And could I assign that floor statement to Senator Kekeffer, please? And that takes us to our last bill, Senate Bill 458.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 458 is what's commonly referred to as the K-12 education funding bill. This bill was presented to the joint money committees yesterday evening in BDR form. The language that the fiscal staff went through with the committees yesterday evening from the BDR has now been transferred to Senate Bill 458 in exactly the same form that it was in the BDR, so no changes has been made from the language that the committees reviewed yesterday to today. There was testimony and support from Hawa Ahmed with the CCEA. There was also testimony in opposition from Victor Salcido, with the Charter School Association of Nevada, and Dusty Casey on behalf of the Oasis Academy Charter School. There was no testimony in neutral. Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff on Senate Bill 458? Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. So I just appreciate the discussion about the charters and making sure that they're held harmless and following up with some legislation to look so fiscal staff can talk to the charter authority and figure out what that is. So I appreciate the work done on that.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Senate Bill 458? Okay, and so I would take a motion to pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? I just wanted to build upon the comments that Senator Severs-Gansert. I think that we've identified, as we're transitioning, and we've identified possibly some gaps. And I think that while this bill mechanically and procedurally is not the place to fix those gaps, we are standing up a model right now. And I think that there's definitely from the chair, but also amongst the committee, there's a desire to close those gaps in the very small sampling of schools, the 7 to 9 charter schools that were identified. And we're going to work as a committee diligently with staff to figure out in a separate, potentially a separate piece of funding, how to close those gaps as we stand up this process for those children here in Nevada. So appreciate everyone's patience, and we'll work together as a committee as soon as we get out of here to try to figure that out in a separate piece of legislation. And so I have a motion. I have a second. Any other discussion on the motion? Senator Dennis.
Comment. I mean, I think this is an exciting step. You know, we put a new funding in place for education, and now we're actually putting the dollars behind getting that going. And while we have had discussion of some things that we need to look at, we have enough flexibility and transparency to be able to have that discussion to fix, these things as we move forward. So for me, it's just an exciting day to see this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion passes unanimously. And I'll assign that floor statement to Senator Dondero Loop, please. And that is it for the business of the day. And we'll move to our last agenda item, which is public comment. And so if we have anybody here in the room to make public comment, if we could limit our comment to 2 minutes, please. And we can get started. Mr. Irvin.
Kent Irvin, Nevada Faculty Alliance, thank you very much. Appreciate that you're doing all this work to juggle the budgets and understand the regular budget process that a lot of these bills just have to go forward at this time. But it's not over, and there's American Rescue Plan funding in the offing. Obviously, we aren't privy to the discussions about how that might be handled, and I won't repeat the comments that I made last night or on Saturday, but PEB restoration, COLAs for all state employees, not just those of us who have collective bargaining. And if we had collective bargaining through SB 373, some of these things could be worked out in advance and more regular process. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jeanette Belts. I'm here representing Friends of Ace High School, a district-sponsored charter school in Washoe County. And we sincerely appreciate the remarks made about the charter schools, but remembering that there are two different kinds of charter schools. There are the ones that are in the authority and then the ones that are in the district. So any conversations about hold harmless, we would appreciate that include the district-sponsored schools. Thank you.
All right, do we have any public comment on the phones?
Thank you, Chair. If you have joined the call and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no public comment callers at this time.
Thank you. So with that, we can adjourn this morning's meeting on Senate Committee on Finance, and have a wonderful day.